We will continue our scripture here in Luke with verses 13 through 34. It says, "Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. And as they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, 'What are you discussing together as you walk along?' And they stood still, their faces downcast. And one of them, named Cleopas, asked him, 'Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there these days?' And Jesus replied, 'What things?' 'About Jesus of Nazareth,' they replied. 'He was a prophet, powerful in words and deeds before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the 3rd day since all of this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find the body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive.' And then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said. But they did not see Jesus. And he said to them, 'How foolish you are and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?' And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all of the scriptures concerning himself. And as they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued as if he were going to go a little bit farther. But they urged him strongly, 'Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over.' So he went in and he stayed with them. And when he was at the table with them, he took the bread and he gave thanks and he broke it. And they recognized him, and he disappeared then from their sight. They asked each other, 'Were not our hearts burning to us on the road as Jesus talked to us and opened those scriptures to us?' They got up and they returned at once to Jerusalem, and there they found the 11 and those who were with them, all assembled together and saying, 'It is true.'" Imagine with me our story today through our scriptures as we are sitting at the table with them. It's not just any table, but it's a sacred table, a table that calls us to remember. This table is filled with symbols and stories, and among the items on this table at the Passover is a small, humble dish of haroset. It looks simple and even ordinary, but when you taste it, it surprises you. It's sweet. It's made with apples, honey, and spices. It has a richness that lingers on your taste buds. But you see, here's the strange part. In the story of the Passover, the haroset represents mortar, the mortar that the Hebrew people used while they were enslaved in Egypt. It's a symbol of suffering, which is bitter, and yet it tastes with sweetness. It makes you pause. And somehow in God's story from Exodus, even the bitter things are not left bitter anymore. The same is true for us today as it echoes in our Easter story. and it continues to speak to us still today. That morning, it was dark. It was early before sunrise. How many of you get up before sunrise? Oh, 5 of you. Okay, that's good. There is a heaviness in that darkness, though, for these women who are going along on the road. It's an uneasy quietness that lingers as if it was a sense of finality in the air. These small group of women left from the walls of Jerusalem, and they were walking their way rather slowly on that road toward the tomb just outside of Jerusalem. Very few words are said along the way. They're still mourning from what had happened just a few days before. Their grief and their pain are raw. And what words would help them, especially since all their hope was now gone? They were headed to the tomb where Jesus, their friend, their teacher, their Lord, had been laid. They carried spices in their hands, which were carefully prepared, because this is what you do when someone you love is gone. You tend to the body. You honor what remains. Over the past days, they were watching all that had happened. They had saw Jesus arrested. They saw him being beaten almost beyond recognition. They saw him carrying his cross. They saw him crucified. They saw where he was laid. There was so much sorrow and so much loss, and now they are coming back to do what love does in the face of death. To finish what they could not do before. Nothing in their facial expressions or in their steps suggests any kind of hope. Only grief, only duty, and the quiet weight of endings. But as they approach from a distance, something feels a little bit off. They see the tomb, but it was somehow different. The stone was no longer over the opening. It was rolled away. And their friend and their teacher and their Lord was supposed to be in there. They stop for a moment, and then they slowly move a little bit closer towards the opening. Their hearts are pounding and struggling to catch their breath. This isn't how the story is supposed to go. And as they look inside, there is no body. The tomb is empty. Confusion, fear, and anger begin to flood their minds. Who would take Jesus' body away? Who would play such a cruel trick? Where did they put him? What was minutes felt like hours as they stood there. But suddenly, standing near them, there was 2 figures, dazzling, which overwhelmed them. It was impossible to ignore them. The women are terrified, and they bow low, faces to the ground. And then comes the question. Are you ready for this question? Why do you look for the living among the dead? It's almost jarring. After all, where else would they be looking for someone who had died just 3 days before? The cemetery is that place where death belongs. It's where endings live. But that question lingers on. Why are you looking for life in a place that is defined by death? And then these words change everything. He is not here. He is risen. And later that same day, the scene shifts into a new location. 2 disciples are walking away from Jerusalem. They're walking away from the confusion in the place where everything seemed to have fallen apart just 3 days before. The walk is about 7 miles to this village, a little village called Emmaus. And along this walk, there is 7 miles of processing, 7 miles of disappointment, and 7 miles of trying to make sense of what had just happened. Their conversation circles seem to rotate around those same phrases over and over again. Can you believe? I thought, and we had hoped. We had hoped he was the one. We had hoped things would be different. We had hoped this would turn out in another way. When hope breaks, it leaves a bitter taste. And they can taste it in every single step, in every single word that is spoken, and in the silence as they walk on. Then, without announcement, without spectacle, someone joins them. Another traveler that's on the road, and he walks along with them at their pace, and he listens to their conversation, and he asks one simple question: what are you discussing? Well, surprised, they stop. Are you the only one who does not know what had happened? And then they tell the story, not the full story, just the story as they understood it. Jesus of Nazareth, a prophet who was powerful and gave us hope, was crucified and is gone. And now we hear rumors, something about the tomb being empty, but it all sounds too strange, too uncertain, too good to believe. So they keep walking, carrying that bitterness that they feel. The stranger continues listening. He doesn't interrupt their grief or dismiss their confusion, but he gently and patiently begins to speak, not with new information, but with deeper understanding. He begins to tell the story differently. He talks about Moses, the prophets, the promises. He connects the suffering to something that is much bigger. Something that has got purpose, something that is redemptive. And as he speaks, something begins to shift. Later, they describe it like this: were not our hearts burning within us as we walked along the road? It's subtle, a warmth where there was cold, a flicker where there was only dimness, a hint of sweetness in what had only been bitter. And for the first time since the cross, something inside of them begins to come alive again. It is the end of the day, and they come to Emmaus. Shadows stretch long across the roads. The stranger continues on, but something in them resist letting him go. They say to him, "Stay with us." It's a simple invitation, but one that changes everything for these two men. As they sit at an ordinary, familiar table, the stranger takes bread and blesses it, and he breaks it, and he gives it to them. It is at that moment that everything becomes clear. Their eyes are open and they see Jesus. Jesus is alive. He's present. He's risen. And he's right here in front of us. As quickly as they recognize him, however, he disappears from their sight. But it doesn't matter. The bitterness has been now transformed. The tomb is still a part of that story, but it's no longer the end of the story. The road still holds sorrow, but it leads to a revelation. The bread is still broken, but now it reveals life. Resurrection takes what was bitter and gives it a whole new meaning, a deeper meaning, a redeemed meaning. Maybe this is where our stories meet up with theirs. We all know what bitterness tastes like. We've stood at our own tombs from time to time. We've walked our own Emmaus roads and said our own "we had hoped" statements. We've experienced disappointments with grief and the silence when things just don't seem to turn out the way that we want them to. But here's the good news of Easter. God is not finished. God is still writing the story. He's writing our stories. And even when you don't recognize it, Christ is there walking with you. Even when it feels like the story has ended, God is still writing the story. Even when all you taste is bitterness, sweetness is being prepared for each of you. The turning point in the story came with a simple invitation. They said, "Stay with us." And maybe that's an invitation for us today too. Stay with Christ. Stay at the table. Stay in the story. Stay open to the possibility that resurrection is closer than you think it is. And because the risen Christ is still revealing himself, still walking those roads, still breaking the bread, and still transforming our lives, and one day you may look back and realize what felt like an ending was really the beginning of something new in your life. The tomb is empty, the road is alive, and the table is set. Christ is risen. Amen.